Holmes was born. Then he got fat, bald, and tired. What's up, Holmes?
Beware your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Holmes, host of Destructoid.com. Oh, my landlord's wife is here. We're having a heck of a time. 11 minutes of technical difficulties on this very special Sup Holmes with Matthew Walden. Hello, Matthew. How are you?
Hey there. I think I brought the curse.
Oh no, for sure. No, it's been a heck of a weekend.
Well,
power outages. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Are you in San Francisco? Is that where the?
No, I'm in Boston, Mass.
You're in Boston. Man, I got it totally wrong. I thought you were part of the San Francisco crowd.
I was for like 3 months. I helped start the Destructoid show with Revision 3, who is ex-G4 people.
Yeah.
You know some of them, maybe.
I know a handful of them, yeah. Well, it's cool to be on here because I was part of Destructoid back in the early days. It felt like the wild west back then. And Destructoid's always special to me. I still read it every day, and I'm a big fan of your show. And just so people wonder, why are they having this guy on who hasn't made a game? It's because I begged Jonathan. And he's a nice guy. He's a sweetheart, and he let me on.
Shaw, that's not true. I wanted to have you on regardless. Now my dog is here. Such a wild panic today.
And I love panic. KK Slider? KK Slider?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. She's got little brown eyebrows. But you asked, you said I've got a lot to say, and that I want to do it on your show. And it's not like I'm just having a friend from off the streets on the show. You are a guy who does things. And you're a guy who does things for interesting reasons, and I hope people are going to find that out. Hopefully we'll have enough time to tell everybody. But we'll start with how you got started at Destructoid. How did you apply for a job there, and how did you end up working for us?
Well, I found Destructoid. I can't remember the first time I came there. It was either because of Hamza, CTZ. I think maybe he posted some pictures of some scantily clad ladies. I don't know if you remember that. That used to be a big deal for Hamza, like the video game controllers all over body parts and stuff. If I'm being completely honest, I might have gotten roped in by one of those pictures. And I was like, whoa, what's this site? And then I stayed for the Retro Force Go crew. Like Colette and Chad and Topher, Dyson. I had felt very isolated loving video games because I didn't have a lot of friends who liked video games. I had a lot of nice friends, but I was kind of like the video game guy among my friends. And then here was this crowd of people who were so enthusiastic about the exact kind of games I liked. And I was like, I want to hang out with these people. I want these people to be my friends. So I was really, really into Retro Force Go, and I think I begged them pretty shamelessly in the comments, let me hang out with you guys. You're so cool. And then Destructoid ended up having a video contest where they were like, okay, everybody submit a video, and we'll have you be a reporter for a weekend of PAX. And it was a big contest, and everybody sent in videos. And I went for it. I went down to Hollywood Boulevard and interviewed a bunch of people and cut together with my wife a little 10-minute, sort of like a little comedy video. And then I won the contest, and then I got chosen to go to PAX for Destructoid and cover it for the weekend. And that was really exciting for me, just because I kind of felt like I got plucked out of obscurity, which is Nero's really good at doing that. Everybody who participates in the website, I think, has a shot of getting involved and making content for Destructoid. And that's how I got my start, and I think they just decided to keep me on after that. And I wrote for Destructoid for about, I think, 6 months. I was on G4 a couple months later to represent Destructoid. They used to have Chad or Colette. A couple of people rotate on Attack of the Show. And that was a lot of fun for me. And it was really strange because I just felt like I was this guy in the comments section. And then all of a sudden I was in the middle of the game industry. And we had, it was definitely the days of Ron Workman. There were some wild nights with Ron Workman and Tiff Chow and Hamza going to crazy parties and jumping in swimming pools with all our clothes on in the middle of the night. It was just a cool time because Destructoid at that time was just, I don't know, it may still be this way, but it was such a young website that everybody felt so energetic and they were kind of the rowdy kids on the back of the bus. As far as the game industry goes, you guys still have that reputation, or
not as much. I think that this was back in what would you say, 2007, 2008?
Yeah, right around then. I think it's. I was trying to do the math, and it seems like 5 years ago or something. It was like right around when the. It was right around when the Wii launched. So yeah, and time's really flown
So
past.
weird. Yeah, you were a little bit before me. I think the first thing I did for Destructoid was Street Fighter 4 post, and then shortly after that it was a Super Smash Brothers Brawl tournament coverage video. So I think you're even a little bit before me.
I was. I think you came in right as I was leaving, but I remember being friends. You were one of my favorites in the comments section in the blogs. You had that cool Mother 3 header with like the ghosts on the top. Oh, you still got that? Nice. Yeah. I was like, this guy knows what's up. And we had very similar taste in games. So I was definitely saying, obviously it's definitely your talent that got you the job at Destructoid, but I was definitely like in the editorial posts or like the secret Destructoid Gmail conversations. I was like, you gotta pick up that Tron nuts because he's amazing.
I had no idea. Yeah, it was a lot of peer pressure on Nick Chester at the time to try to get them to hire me. It wasn't easy. It was like 6 months of emails. But anyway, more about you. After you left Destructoid, you went on to work on TV and movies. Is that right?
Yeah, I worked on the TV show Lost for actually 2 seasons of the TV show Lost. And I worked on a couple of different movies. I worked on Pineapple Express and Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And I worked on Prince of Persia, which I'll apologize now for. Am I allowed to say that? No, people watch the show, don't they? Yeah. I don't think Prince of Persia was what a lot of people hoped. I worked on the DVD bonus features. Yes, I did a little bit of like silly movie stuff. And I don't think people knew this at the time, but I actually kind of quit Destructoid. It was a little bit out of the blue. I gave like a 2-week notice to Nero. And this is a little bit about what we're going to talk about on this podcast. I wanted to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and violence in games. And I know a lot of people probably are sick now after the last couple of months of the violence in games talk, just because like it's a big topic of discussion. But I feel like I've got kind of an interesting viewpoint on it. So don't turn off the station yet, or keep listening, because I think it might be an argument you quite haven't heard presented this way. And basically, it's about how really violent video games have helped me be a better person. And I think most people, the argument is usually violent games are horrible, or violent games, they're not that bad. They don't do any harm. But I don't really hear the argument made that violent games can actually be healthy and good for people. And I think I'm going to jump into that a little bit as we move along. But I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've had it for most of my life and just haven't realized it. I think that might be the case with a lot of people who like you have a bunch of serious situations happen, and at least for me as a guy, I'm not necessarily a macho man, but there's like an internal pressure I think a lot of guys feel if something bad happens. You got to kind of like brush it off and like, oh, that didn't bother me, that didn't affect me because I'm really tough. I'm really macho. So I definitely had that attitude for a long time, even though clearly things were affecting me brain-wise upstairs from some of the serious things that have happened. So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more after we talk about some of the stuff I've done. But Destructoid, I quit because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Some things had been happening, and it just got to the point where it's too much that I could handle, and I kind of went on an internet blackout, where I just wasn't participating in the internet anymore because it started to like trigger negative feelings for me. So, and I don't think people, I think when I left Destructoid, a lot of like posts were like, where'd Tristero go? They had like pictures of me like getting kidnapped, I think, just as a joke, like tied up to a chair. Cause I didn't do one of those like goodbye posts to tell everybody like I'm leaving. It was just kind of a private conversation between me and Nero and CTZ. So it's definitely something that's pretty dramatically affected my life in the sense that like it's changed my career direction a couple of times. Like I would have loved to continue with Destructoid if I had the capacity, but I think I felt overwhelmed at the time. So I took a break and did like some of these TV shows, like Lost and a little bit of movies work. And eventually I got picked up to work on Game Trailers TV with Jeff Keighley. And that was fun because I was getting back into the video game world again, and I had missed that a lot because it's definitely one of the primary passions of my life. I think anybody who has the video game bug knows you can't get rid of it even if you want to. I don't know if it's like this for you, because you have a full-time day job, right?
Yeah, that's right. I
I don't know.
actually I work with people with PTSD all the time. Actually, 40 to 50 hours a week. In
Now,
a,
are you actually a therapist, or what is your actual position?
I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker, and right now I do that on an inpatient basis. So it's people who are having a really bad time for whatever reason. They end up in a locked psychiatric hospital, and I talk to them about what's going on and try to help them work it out and then get out of the hospital, and then after that I don't see them again. But I've also done some just outpatient therapy as well. I might get back into that. You have to know, for social work, you have to know a little bit about everything, because it could be anything from someone is depressed to has major mental illness to
Hmm.
is just avoiding jail, or one lady came in because she was sad about her cat and she just doesn't cope very well. I had to know how to save cats, save people, do all sorts of things at my job. It's a real kind of jack of all trades type deal. And for me, getting to focus on video games after work is a way to get to know people outside of direct contact. Because when I get to play a video game, I can get to know the developer kind of from the inside out. Because to me, their games are often kind of who they are in an internal world. You get to run around the inside of their brain that way. Whereas at my day job, I have to analyze people and try to get in their heads through talking to them. If I play a Suda 51 game, I can run around in Suda 51's head with a controller and not have to worry about actually saying the right thing to them. So for me, they're very similar jobs in a way. It's all analysis and getting to know communication. Why did I talk about myself so much?
Because I asked you. No, that's
Oh.
right. It sounds like maybe this is going out on a limb, but it sounds like you're a good person who does worthwhile things in the world. Is that too far of me to make that
I don't
assumption?
know. I hope so. Some
um,
people think so.
so
Some
how in
people,
the world
yeah.
do you do all this Destructoid work on top of like doing 50 hours a week of like working with mental health patients? Like, how do you find the time to crunch that all in?
I don't want to rest at all. I hate resting. Like if I am just sitting around idle, I feel like my life is slipping away. And it's actually been a theme on the show lately. We've had all these guests on lately who are like in their early 20s, and I'm always I'm a little bit ageist, I guess. I presume they're not going to care that much about their mortality, but they're all like, I need to make the very best games I can before I die. And I work like nonstop, and I put everything I can into it. Like Nels Anderson was on last week, made
Sure,
Market of
yeah, yeah,
Ninja,
yeah.
and he was totally focused on his own mortality and putting everything into his work while he still could. And that's kind of where I come from too.
You have all these young geniuses on the show that are very intimidating, that make me like wonder like what have I been doing with myself. I think like there was a point in my life when I was like a teenager or a kid where I'm like, I'm going to be one of those like child prodigies who like really everybody's going to be amazed at how smart I am for how young I am. And I think at this point in my life, I'm like 31, I'm going to be 32. My birthday is next weekend.
Oh,
And thank you. This is actually the kickoff of my birthday week because I've wanted to be on Sub Holmes so bad. So this is like an early birthday present for me. But I think at this point I'm realizing, yeah, maybe that child prodigy thing, the door is closed on that for me. I'm not going to be a child prodigy. I'll have to be like an old man prodigy is what I'm like setting my sights on now. That
they're
I'll
almost
take
as
off.
good. Morgan Freeman, I don't think, got really big in movies till like his 50s. And he had suffered from alcoholism and all sorts of like terrible trials of life before then. And now he plays God and is the soothing sidekick to every female cop in every female cop movie. So
Yeah,
that could be you.
that should give us hope. Yeah. So I ended up working for Game Trailers TV, which was just it was an awesome job. And I know a lot of people who yeah, Spike TV is a little bit controversial. They do the VGAs, which I know are not universally beloved, and probably for good reasons. But there's a lot of cool stuff that kind of makes it through the cracks at that big Viacom corporate network. Like there's a lot of stuff where you just kind of have to like, it's a show with a lot of money involved, so you have to kind of like pay attention to ratings and things like that. But as a writer there, I was given so many opportunities to do cool things, and I think that I don't blame people for picking on Spike for the things that are bad. You know, the like exploitative things with scantily clad women and all that. That bugs me too. But I think that there's a lot of talented people there who are able to do good things in the middle of all that. So while I was there, I wrote for Jeff Keighley, and I did scripts for every single episode of GTTV. And I ended up, one of the big things I worked on there was this thing called the Science of Games. And we had the physicist, Dr. Michio Kaku, who's like he's a Japanese guy. He's like on Discovery Channel, like a lot of science documentaries. And he was kind of a hero of mine growing up in high school. I really looked up to him. And then getting to work with him on this show was definitely like, it was like a exciting dream come true. And we had him talk about like science topics and video games. Like we'd take a game like Fallout 3, and we'd use that as kind of like a launching step to talk about nuclear warfare and nuclear proliferation and what we can do about nuclear bombs in the world, which is kind of cool to like have that on Spike TV, like a political and scientific discussion, like in the middle of like a Call of Duty preview or something like that. So yeah, I think Game Trailers TV is definitely a mixed bag from an audience perspective. There's so many people who work there who really love games and are putting good content out there, and then it just gets mixed in with like all the big network requirements. So sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle, but we focused on games like Limbo with Super Meat Boy. We had Aaron, do you know Lively Ivy, Aaron Robinson?
Yeah, she's actually going to be on the show.
Oh, great. She's amazing. She did Puzzle Bots and Super Bots, I think, are the name of her big games. I'm not sure what she's working on now, but we were able to like interview her for the show. So it was fun. Like they gave me a lot of freedom to do cool things while I was there. Jeremy Hoffman, I think you've met him. He's got a big beard, just like a really nice, happy, jolly guy with so much like energy, and he's really smart. And worked with him for 2 years, and it was cool. I liked working there a lot more than I thought I would, just because I'm not like a Spike dude. And my taste in video games kind of lean towards yours. Like I like indie games and Japanese style crazy games. But I was able to like devote most of my time at Spike working on that kind of stuff. So yeah, I did that for about 2 years. And then I quit Spike, and a couple of people know this who I worked with, because of post-traumatic stress disorder again. It's something I didn't have diagnosed at the time. And I think the way post-traumatic stress disorder works for me is it's not big things that are stressful for me. I think what happens is I've had so many crazy incidents happen in my life that the big things I actually kind of act calm during, because I'm used to feeling scared. That's not an abnormal feeling for me. So I can actually be kind of collected when. But then later on, normal things in real life that aren't that big of a deal, like, ooh, somebody's yelling at the office, or, oh, my relative's sick, or something like that. Something like that will totally blow up in my mind out of proportion into a bigger deal, just because I have so many stress chemicals flooding my brain that my brain doesn't understand that, oh, getting a parking ticket isn't the same as like somebody violently attacking me, which is kind of crazy. But so like normal life stresses me out way more than it should a normal person. And then when I was working on Game Trailers, I still didn't have that figured out. I didn't know that something was wrong with me. And I think that there's the common term like denial, like you could just kind of pretend for a while that that you've got a normal brain and it's operating the way it should. But I just wasn't able to handle stress well. And it's not something that people know who are my friends, because I'm pretty collected and mild-mannered and calm. Like I'm not like, my PTSD isn't like Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now, where I'm like tearing my t-shirt off and like hitting myself in the head because I think a helicopter's outside. It doesn't take that far. I think most people wouldn't even know if I was having a moment. Just because it's all like internal, but like it's not pleasant to have your body constantly flooded with stress hormones.
Absolutely.
From what I understand about PTSD, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and when violent things happen, in some part of the population. It doesn't happen to everybody, so I don't think they know if it's entirely genetic or what. But the flight or fight response gets triggered in your amygdala, and it just kind of stays on. It never gets turned off. So your brain just has an overload of all these stress and adrenaline hormones, even during normal times of life when nothing bad's happening. And I think at Game Trailers, it was just got to the point where like I was like, I can't handle this, and I'm worried I'm gonna mess up or like drop the ball on the TV show, and I just got to take a break. So I ducked out of there. I took a break for a little while, and I ended up working for reality TV, which is not as exciting as video games, unfortunately. And I work on silly shows like LA Inc. and Swamp People, and I should say nice things about it because it's my current profession, and I want to continue to work there. But I think we all know reality TV, it's junk food. Like, it's not really socially redeeming.
I think there's a little Swamp People has opened my eyes to in terms of dealing with classism. You know, I think a lot of people would assume, oh, the Swamp People, I can't relate with them. But if you look past the way they are on the surface and see what they're like underneath, I can relate with those Swamp People. Same with those tattooed people on LA Inc. You might think, oh, tattooed people. They're great people.
That's funny. Well, that's good. Yeah, so reality TV, what it does is it affords me the opportunity to have a lot of time off from work. Like, I'll work it's freelance, so I just like work from gig to gig and kind of cycle around. I'll work for 3 months, take 3 months off, and I'm a writer, so I spend a lot of my time on writing. Like, that's definitely my biggest kind of like passion and obsession in life is writing. So that's kind of cool about reality TV is it's like a very like kind of carefree, loose lifestyle. I'll go make some money, then I'll coast off of it for a little while and work from home, play a bunch of video games. If I'm going a little crazy because my PTSD is flaring up, I can just be at home and kind of like focus on those issues and not have to worry about being normal in an office. And I don't want to give people the impression that I'm like difficult to work with because I'm actually very pleasant to work with. But I do get my stress hits a certain point where I'm like, okay, I don't think I can continue with this job at Game Trailers. I gave them a 1 month notice before I left. So I'm not like very flaky. It's more just like a private, personal battle that PTSD causes with me.
Absolutely. And we should kind of probably get into where the PTSD came from.
Oh yeah, this
that'll
is
help
the
people.
good stuff. If we still have some listeners, this is where it gets exciting. It really is. Like, it's definitely not fun at the time. I don't mean to make light of serious situations, but I just have such a crazy collection of things that happen to me. A lot of times when people meet me, they think I'm joking a lot or tell like a lot of like facetious stories just because it's hard to believe so many crazy things have happened to one person. So I want to tell some of those funny things because they're going to help us understand how I think they interlock with video games and how video games are actually like a useful tool for people dealing with real world violence. Rather than contributing to real world violence, I really think they can contribute towards helping people be nonviolent. So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. And so I'm not going to tell everything about what led to my PTSD because some things are a little more grim, and I don't think it's a Sunday afternoon. People want to go out and have a picnic. So if people hear some of this stuff and go, "Oh, that's not that bad. Why does he have PTSD?" There's some other stuff I'm not going to be mentioning, and I'll just leave that to your imagination. That I actually do have a catalog of some pretty serious things, and I just kind of want to talk about the more fun ones today because that's enough to give us an idea of what we're working with.
Sure.
So I sort of had a little bit of a crazy childhood. I'm trying to think of like probably one of the biggest things I can think of. I grew up in Hawaii, which was a fun place to grow up in, and I actually lived in a volcano crater, like a dormant volcano crater. They had government housing there for, I guess, to like assist families who needed help paying rent. So I lived in government housing, and at the time, the neighborhood was a little bit rough. There were a lot of kids whose parents weren't around, a lot of dads who were in the military and off like in Iraq or something like that. So a lot of like rambunctious kids left alone without supervision. And there was definitely like a little bit of a gang trouble in my neighborhood. And now when I look back at it as an adult, this is more like teenager. Can I swear on this show?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Swear all the time,
I'm going to swear. Here we go. I'm going to break the swearing seal. So it's just a lot of teenagers fucking around. Like, it's not like the mafia gangs. It's not like, oh, you know, like Italian mobsters were in my neighborhood. It was just like teenagers causing trouble with no supervision. But I was in elementary school. So at that point in time, any kind of gangsters, you know, with weapons is definitely scary to me as a little elementary school kid. So basically, one night, I was sleeping downstairs in my room, in their family room. I had grandparents visiting upstairs, and they were sleeping in my room. And I heard some gunshots outside of our house. And I told my parents, I was like, you know, I think someone's shooting at our house. And they kind of did the typical, like, it's all right, there's no monster on the bed, go back to sleep. And they're like, look, we'll turn on the back porch light just to prove to you that you know, nobody's shooting at the house. It's okay. So my mom goes to flip on the back porch light, and we had like a big sliding glass door. You know, those like doors that lead out to a porch made out of glass. As soon as she flipped on the light, like bullets just like came raining through the sliding glass door, and it shattered all the glass. And then I was like, kind of like, told you so, or you know what I mean? Just as a kid, I was like, those are real bullets. So luckily nobody got hurt or injured during this occasion. We had to call the police, and you know, it was a big deal, and they came to, like, you know, measure where the bullets were. And it turned out, I guess, our next door neighbor, we lived in a little like apartment thing with a bunch of different families like right next to each other. Our neighbor was in trouble with a gang, and they were going after him, and they were trying to shoot his house, and they accidentally got my house instead because they saw the porch light, and they're like, oh, there's a good place to aim at, let's shoot that. Now what happened is I had to like give a police report and tell them what happened, because I was the one who heard it first. And they ended up catching the guy who had shot up our house. But because I was a little kid, and like a little kid, you know, they like excitement and stuff, I think I was bragging about this at school. I was like, hey guys, my house, can you believe it? My house got shot up. Somehow this word got around to people's older brothers that I think I probably even built up the story myself. Like, yeah, I hope the cops catch them, just because, you know, you're a little elementary school kid.
Sure.
I tried to make myself sound important. Somehow the word got back around to these guys that I had busted one of their friends or helped like get their friend arrested. So instead of it coming after my neighbor now, they were actually after me too. So one morning when I came out on my way to school, our entire front porch and sidewalk had all this graffiti spray painted all over it, and it said like kill Matt should die, and then like a bunch of like crazy like gang codes and gang symbols. And that was terrifying as a kid, because I was like, you know, like the bullets are one thing, and like it seemed like an accident, like just kind of like, oh, we accidentally wound up at the wrong place at the wrong time. But when they actually had my name spray painted on the front porch, and kids, obviously all the kids in the neighborhood were like, dude, this is serious, they're not happy with you. So that was a little scary. I had a paper route at the time where I would deliver newspapers in the neighborhood, and I would see some of these guys on the paper route, and they would like chase me and try and set my hair on fire, which is kind of silly now if you think about it. Like these like 18-year-old kids kind of screwing around with an elementary school kid that doesn't seem very tough now as an adult. I don't know. I think you know, they probably had their own troubles. Not to let them get off scot-free, but obviously there's something wrong with you if you're chasing elementary school kids.
To light their hair on fire. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. So what would happen is these guys would start trying to climb up into our house. Like I had a bedroom on the second floor, and then like in the middle of the night I would hear like some scratching on the side of the house, and I'd look out the window and it would be like one of these gang members like climbing up on the side of the house trying to get into my window, and I had to call my dad, and he'd like yell at him to get him away. On our back porch, one of these guys had like snuck over with a knife. Like I saw him on the back porch with a knife. I had to like call my dad. I was like, there's another gangster, like go scare him off, Dad. So I kind of felt like constantly like under siege. It wasn't really a nice neighborhood. I mean, maybe it's nice now. I don't mean to like, I lived in Hawaii. I'm not ungrateful for that. But there was some trouble in the neighborhood. There was another guy who was an alcoholic a couple doors down, and he used to threaten me with a shotgun when he'd get drunk. Like he'd be on the front porch and he'd have a shotgun out, and he'd be like, hey, Matt, you're a bad kid, aren't you? I can tell you're a bad kid. I think you deserve to get shot. And then he'd like put down the shotgun and like take a drink and be like, I'm just screwing with you, kid. You're all right. So it was definitely like trouble everywhere. You know what I mean? Like as a kid, you don't know how serious to take this. Like I don't know if these gangsters actually would have hurt me or not, but as a kid, you know what I mean? Like everything seemed so serious. Here's what I want to get into as far as like this too rough? You're giving me all these expressions like.
Yeah, these are the kind of stories that elicit a facial expression
Well,
in a panel. Especially when you're like, oh, I don't want to be mean. I'm sure it's a nice neighborhood. It was in Hawaii, but there was the old man with the shotgun. That was a little troubling. And the men climbing up my house with a knife like Pirates of the Caribbean, like scaling the yes, these are pretty intense things for an elementary school kid to be going through.
Sure, and I really didn't know like how to process it at the time. At the time, I don't think it was really like now. There's a lot of like focus on psychology and mental health. I think I'm an oldie, so it wasn't quite like this in the early 80s where like, oh, let's get this kid to a therapist or a counselor. It was just like, oh, let's make sure the danger isn't happening anymore, and then we'll move on with our lives. So I played a lot of video games at this time, obviously. I was really into video games. And this part is going to sound a little sketchy, but I guarantee people I'm a nice person. I'm a non-violent person. I'm a vegetarian. I'm a pacifist. I protest wars, so I'm definitely like one of the least violent people you'll meet. But when I was a kid and all this crazy stuff was happening to me, I was like, what do I need to do? I need to like defend myself. I need to defend my family. And I started having all these like fantasies in my mind of like maybe I can get a gun, or I can steal a gun from one of these gangsters, or I'll find one, and then I'll bring it to school with me, and then I'll protect myself in case anything bad happens. And then I think a lot of times what happens with people with PTSD is like I'm trying to think of the word, not desensitization. You maybe know the word where you're like you're not feeling like you're in your body. What's that called?
That's a disassociation.
Disassociation. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so that would happen a little bit where like real life just didn't feel real to me. I think that was like a way of a kid kind of dealing with fear, is like stuff just starts to feel like, am I in a movie? Is this a dream? Maybe this is a bad dream and this isn't like real life. And maybe the way I get out of the bad dream is by like attacking someone and winning and winning back the day and being the hero of this bad dream, and then maybe I'll wake up and real life will be better. So when I heard later as an adult, when I heard things like Columbine happening, obviously that's a terrible tragedy, but I kind of understand that mental space of just not buying into the reality of what's in front of you. And I think that's the only way somebody could do something really terrible and violent, is by not treating other people as if they're real people with feelings themselves, almost becoming like distance from real life. So even though I never did anything violent, I definitely understand a little bit of maybe what was happening in their minds that would lead them to do that. I never acted on it, but I definitely had dark fantasies as a young elementary school kid. And I would play a lot of video games. There was one particular game I liked a lot at the time, which was Lethal Enforcers. And I don't know if you remember Lethal Enforcers. It's a Konami light gun game.
Oh, sure.
Came out with a Super Nintendo. There was a little blue light gun that came with it. It was kind of realistic back then. I don't think they make toy guns that look that way anymore. This was bright blue, but it was shaped, like a pistol. And you would stop bank robbers and like shoot down bad guys. And one of the things the game had was innocent civilians. You got penalized if you shot an innocent civilian. A big red sign would come up, be like, you did something bad. Well, I had a Game Genie at the time. So what I did is I programmed my Game Genie to not penalize me for shooting the innocent civilians, just because I was like, I wonder what it would feel like to go on a shooting rampage in this game. And then, so I tried it, and I was like, maybe this will make me not stressed out. I'll pretend everybody in this game are all the people trying to come out to get me, and I'll feel really powerful, and I'll shoot them all. And here's what happened when I tried it. I felt terrible. I felt horrible. Like, it really, really affected me. Like, I played for about half an hour, and I was like, okay, this civilian's a bad person. They're one of the people trying to come get me, and I'd shoot them. And then, like, it was a really interesting experience. And I think the common narrative that people have is that a troubled kid goes and plays a violent video game, and then they go and do something terrible because of it. But what this violent video game did for me is it sort of like awoke my compassion a little bit. I was able to like act out on these violent impulses and realize that if I did this and something like this in real life, it would make me feel terrible. Like just doing it in the video game version made me feel bad enough. And I felt like I'd done something awful just experimenting around with a video game. And I kind of felt ashamed that I'd had like this half-hour rage moment or something like that. And the cool thing is I got to experience that guilt and remorse without doing it in real life, without having to like learn the lesson the hard way that hurting people feels bad. And I think a lot, I mean, this is a little bit dark and serious, but a lot of times these shooting sprees that happen in real life end up with a person killing themselves at the end. And I can imagine because it doesn't feel so good to hurt other people. And I think it's cool that, at least for someone like me, I'm not saying like if Lethal Enforcers wasn't there, I would have become a maniac. But it definitely pushed me in the right direction of considering what these violent fantasies meant for me, and if they were actually something that I really desired, or if they were just the fear part of my brain trying to make myself feel tougher. So I got to explore these really serious emotions without having to deal with the horrible real-world consequences of hurting someone. And I think that's extremely valuable. That's a really good thing for humanity to have at their disposal, because you can read a book about something violent happening and it can affect you in one way, or you can watch a movie. But the participatory nature of video games is something really unique to the medium, in that you can experiment with having different personalities or taking very drastic actions in the world and get to feel a little bit of what those consequences are like. And this is a rudimentary game, obviously, from like the early 90s. So they did not have like the technology of like moral choice and like complex graphics that we have now. And I just think there's such a cool opportunity for developers to explore this. And there are some games I want to talk a little bit more as we go on that have actually helped me in my life with my PTSD. Sorry, I'm kind of like rambling. Do you have?
No, that's a very.
That was a linear, well-structured. It's almost like you've rehearsed this. Have you ever thought about taking this to the lecture circuit?
The lecture circuit.
Yeah.
If somebody will take me, I will present a talk.
You know, this could be a rough draft for that. I mean, this could be something you. I hope so. I think that this is something that the media can't stop talking about, and the people in the media, as you know better than most, even the video games media, there's some stigma against video games at some point. When you were talking about Spike TV, even when you were talking about work you're proud of, you're also kind of like, yeah, but it was Spike TV, and there's things that come along with that. The mainstream media looks down on video game media, video game players, video game everything with just such an intense gaze, and they can't stop talking about how it's all video games' fault, and they truly believe it. So to have someone be able to give the counterpoint to that is incredibly valuable, and I would love for you to just do that, please.
To send people my way. I'd be glad to talk about it, because it gets more interesting. Like, we're just getting to the good stuff here. I should actually pick up the pace so we can get some of these good stories.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know it's been said time and time again, but it's just very juvenile to like attack video games as if they're responsible for it. And I think it's just like a misunderstanding of. I mean, like the Supreme Court decided 2 years ago that freedom of speech applies to video games, and I think it certainly does. And I don't think people understand what freedom of speech means. The ones who are trying to attack violent games, or attack or ban them, or say that they shouldn't exist, or like even poor Warren Spector talking about Lollipop Chainsaw couldn't exist a couple of days ago. Did you hear that? Warren Spector died. He's a nice guy, but what is he thinking? I love Lollipop Chainsaw. That was one of my favorite games of last year.
Yeah, he clearly didn't play it, and he clearly has bought into the stigma of sex and violence equals sexist and or glorifying violence. And I didn't. My take on Lollipop Chainsaw, some would say I read into it too deeply, but to me it was about the cute girl who gets treated like a piece of meat at school, and she gets to turn the tables for a change. Yeah. And I know a lot of women who've played it, or like, this is like my anti-sexism fantasy, but with a little bit of critique of the Valley Girl stereotype thrown in. Plus, she's got a boyfriend who's just a human head, who she gets to treat like a like an object. Really detailed, interesting stuff going on there. To say it shouldn't exist just because it's violent and it's got the occasional butt shot, I think it's pretty weird.
Well, see, the thing is, like, if you don't believe in freedom of speech for things you dislike, then you don't believe in it at all. You don't believe freedom of speech isn't about stuff that you approve of. Freedom of speech is about you have to defend like the most noxious, terrible things if it's an ideal you really believe in. And for me, it's really important because that's where all the rest of our freedoms come from. Like if freedom of speech disappears, how are you going to talk about an issue that's important to you, or like expand freedom even further? So I'm pretty much an absolutist when it comes to freedom of speech, and I think that video games really deserve it just as much as anything else. And I think like I actually learned a lesson when I was in college. I was at Barnes and Noble. And I was going through the books, and I came across the Turner Diaries. I don't know, do you know the Turner Diaries? It's a terribly racist garbage. I think it's kind of like related to the KKK a little bit. It's a fiction book about a race war and some very violent depictions of things happening to other races, of people who aren't white. And Timothy McVeigh actually loved this book. And I guess it partially inspired him to do the Oklahoma City bombings. And when I saw this in Barnes & Noble, just in their regular fiction section, I kind of said to my friend, I was like, geez, do you think they really should be selling this here? This doesn't seem appropriate to me. And he goes, of course they should be selling it here. Of course. Like, we live in a democracy. You should have free access to all information, even stuff that's disgusting and that you disagree with. And I really took that to heart and found that, like, after that point, I started to explore opinions that I disagree with more than ones that I agree with. And I think people should do that a lot, because nothing bad can happen if you hear something you disagree with. Because let's say you hear something you disagree with and you were wrong, and the information ends up being right, then you get to change your mind and you get to be right in the future. And if your original opinion, like my original opinion that racism is awful and there shouldn't be a violent race war, if I read this book, it's going to bring up a lot of things in my mind about the way a racist person thinks, or the way a violent racist person thinks. And I'm going to have a more nuanced position against what they have to offer. So I really think it's like having faith in ideas, and that good ideas will eventually win the day. And then when people try and talk about banning violent video games, I think, like, well, you have newspaper articles every weekend where, like, a journalist is giving an editorial, and he's like, oh, we should go bomb this country because it'll stop terrorism. I don't want to get into the politics of whether or not that argument's right. That leads to violence a lot more than playing video games do. Like, or like, let's say a banker has a thing where, like, I disagree with canceling third world debt, and I think we should IMF as a leverage against this country and exploit their workers. He has every right to say that as a banker, and that may lead to deaths in that country, and it's terrible, and it's a political position I disagree with. But as people who believe in democracy and freedom of speech, we realize even if speech leads to bad effects, it's still protected. You're allowed to have a discussion of ideas. And I think that offend me. I love video games, but there are violent games where I think, like, that's too much for me. Like God of War 3. Did you play that one? I think a lot of people had a reaction to that one. This is taking the violence a little bit too far. I remember one particular puzzle. I was Kratos, and, like, there was a naked lady, which is fine on its own. Like, I like naked ladies as much as the next person, maybe even more. But, like, Kratos shoves her in the middle of a crank and, like, flattens her as, like, part of the puzzle. And I was just, like, totally horrified, disgusted by it. I was like, this is terrible. There's no way this isn't misogynistic and, like, some kind of weird sexual violent fantasy. And guess what? I think that game has every right to exist. I think we should talk about it as a community who cares about the medium and have a discussion like, is this what we want our games to be about? What does it mean when things like this happen in the game? But at the same time, I want to defend its right to exist and their right to express those horrible ideas. And just jump on in there, please. Go for it.
Sure? I don't know. You're on the chair.
Go for it.
I gotta bite my tongue. I'm of the opinion that teaching racist, sexist, homophobic, what have you people how to hide causes more problems sometimes than it's worth. Because if you say, oh, that sounds racist when you say that, don't say that. Then racist people will say, okay, I'll find a more insidious, quiet, sneaky way to get under people's skin and spread my propaganda in a way that people won't realize they're doing it. I don't know if you've seen the news, but the KKK has a whole new plan where they're now saying they're not racist. And thank God. I mean, they're still wearing the hood, and they're like sitting on a patio drinking iced tea and being like, "We're not anti-other races. We're just for our race." Shutting it down. And to me, it's funny because it's so. At least we can see through them that clearly. But we're getting to a point where political correctness can do so much more harm than good because we're arming the people who are for hate speech, are for discrimination, are for putting other people down with tools to get around what we have to try to publicly denounce them and call them out. And to encourage people to not make video games that are sexist and racist is good, but you can't just look at the surface level stuff and call that out and say, oh, well, all boobs should be banned from games because boobs automatically sexually objectify women. Then they'll just cover up women and then throw them in the crank and kill them. They'll say, oh, no, now it's fine. No boobs, so it's not sexist. And then people will have a harder time calling them out. So I'm all for them being obvious as long as we have the wherewithal to call them out on what they're doing. Resident Evil 5 in particular, that's a pretty... I wanted them to just call that game Racism the Game and just show it. Like, yep, white people are scared of black people, so shoot them, the game. And then people could have had a full-on discussion about it. But
Sure.
But they jumped on it so quickly that they kind of watered it down and then added a sidekick character who is, kind of a stereotypical African-American woman with a lot of Caucasian features, which is a long-standing trope to kind of make it palatable.
It's problematic. Definitely.
Yeah, very, very. But then the discussion didn't really happen about it. And I don't blame people for calling the game out for having racially charged imagery ahead of time, and I don't blame Capcom for trying to change it because they didn't want that reputation. But there was a real missed opportunity for a conversation and for the people who made the game to really reflect on what they did and be like, we are just trying to sell fear of black people to a largely non-black audience and make money off of it. Or they could have changed the storyline so Chris Redfield has like an awakening at the end and be like, why have I been shooting all these poor black people all day? I'm a terrible person. That would have been good too. I could go on.
I love it.
I'm sorry. Now I'm going.
No, that's great. I need a chance to catch my breath.
Sure.
I think that it makes me think of the whole Anita how do you say her name?
Sarkisian, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way the response to that has developed because obviously the reaction to her is. This is probably going to be controversial. Is it okay for me to say controversial things on your show?
I just said that they should have called Resident Evil 5 Racism the Game, so you're doing fine by my standards.
Obviously, the people who are attacking her so passionately obviously have some weird issues with women. Obviously. And I've seen some of her tropes about women videos on different subjects, and I don't agree with everything she has to say. I would consider myself a feminist supporter or pro-feminist or whatever the most correct term is to use now, because I think women are people and they should have equal rights. So I think the fact that she wants to talk about these things in games is fine, even if I disagree with some of her things, or if she calls Bayonetta sexist, and I love Bayonetta and I don't think it's sexist, that's okay. Let her have her talk. But the reaction to her is so terrible. As far as I guess they made a video game with people beating her up, and she's gotten threats of rape and attack over Twitter and email and Facebook, and that's ridiculous because I think that when people criticize video games in the smart way that she's doing, even if you don't agree with their opinion, they're lending video games validity by treating them as a subject worthy of serious discussion. Like, I think it only helps the medium to have these healthy debates. And the fact, like, I don't care if you're not a feminist, that's whatever. If you don't agree with Anita's point of view, that's fine. But because she's an intelligent person in a democracy talking about a medium you care about, you should support her right to do that. And you should defend her from assholes who are threatening her with sexual violence. I don't know. The Phelps, what's their name? The crazy people who have the signs and boycott funerals. What's their name? Are they the...
A lot of people. The Westminster Baptist.
Yeah, those guys.
Something. Westboro, maybe.
This is how absolutist of a...
Beware, Westboro Baptist Church.
Okay, obviously those are horrible people, and I don't like them, and I hate them. But if someone threatened them with sexual violence for participating in a discussion in our democracy, I would defend them immediately. Because debate and freedom of speech is that important to me. And I think if you really care about video games, then, and I get it, some people just have this knee-jerk reaction, like, I gotta protect my baby, don't take away my video games from me. And video games are under attack sometimes. But the way to support them is not by going out and attacking some, like, feminist girl who you disagree with, or feminist lady, feminist woman, sorry, probably girl is the wrong choice. Feminist woman who's giving a thoughtful discussion about the medium you love. So I know that's a tangent, but since we were on freedom of speech stuff.
No, I'm with you 100%. I wouldn't, just like when people on CNN say video games are problematic, and I might not agree with them, I almost never do. I'm not telling them to stop doing that. I want to take that as a jumping off point to try to give my 2 cents on it, and for other people to as well, to get the discussion going, and hopefully people will learn from it. With Anita Sarkeesian, I feel like there's a lot of classism and resentment on the fact that she made so much money. A lot of people think that she just wanted to get rich quick and say a bunch of things that sounded smart and trick people into giving her hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she hasn't put out a video yet, so people are thinking, oh, she just took the money and run, which is possible, and if she did that, then yeah, the time to criticize her at that point. But as you know, making a video with now, millions of people with their eyes on it, you don't necessarily want to just rush that out. I'm assuming she's just working very hard on getting her message put together exactly as she wants to.
Sure, and you know what? Like, okay, maybe she was late, but like the people who are criticizing her, I doubt they're the people who backed it. You know what I mean? I doubt they're the ones who are like, I spent $200 for feminism, and now I don't have my feminist video I wanted so much. To me, it sounds like the KKK not able to say they're racist anymore. This is a misogynist who know it's not popular to say, I hate women. I'm going to get so much flack for this. But so, okay, I'll jump on the bandwagon. She's late delivering her video. Well, Tim Schafer's late delivering his Kickstarter game for Double Fine, but no one's like, Tim Schafer's a big crook, and he just did Kickstarter to steal our money. Like, they're ridiculous. Well, I should jump into some more of these crazy stories, because I got a few more if we got time to go on.
We do.
Okay, well, at college, and this is probably the reason I got in touch with you. At college, I was held up at gunpoint in a movie theater. This added to like the PTSD catalog. And basically, I was working at an art house movie theater. I was the box office guy. And I think, if I couldn't remember correctly, we were actually showing Bowling for Columbine at the time in that movie theater that I got robbed with a gun, which is kind of funny. Maybe it's not funny. It's funny. It's ironic. Maybe that's the word. I was safe. I got out of it okay, but it was a pretty violent incident. Like, I got like shook down and yelled at, and the gun pointed at me, and had to give all the money away from the movie theater, which it's not the smartest place to rob a little tiny art house movie theater showing documentaries. The guy must have made like $300 or something from robbing us. And nobody believed me when I came out and told them, like, hey, I just got robbed with a gun. They thought I was joking. And I guess because I've had so much gun violence before in my life, that it just kind of wasn't like that startling to me at the time. But eventually I convinced people, and the police came and they did an investigation, and I didn't think it bothered me right away. It just didn't sink in for the first day. And what I did is, I think like probably anybody who plays video games, the first thing they do if they have a stressful bad day is like, oh, I'm that was a sucky day at work. I'm gonna play some video games, and I just went on like a crazy Super Mario World 2 marathon just because I was like, this is like the most peaceful, happy thing I can kind of submerge myself into. And I played that until I was waiting for my girlfriend at the time. Now she's my wife, to come home, and then like tell her like, oh, kind of had a bad day at work, and then like seeing her reaction made me realize like how serious it was, just because I was like, that sucked, let me play some video games. And I'm trying to find a way to wrap this together, because there's a technological component to how video games help with PTSD too, not just a thematic component. Have you heard of the eye movement? I think it's called, let me look it up here in my notes.
EMDR?
That's exactly it. EMDR. Could you maybe explain that in 1 minute to somebody if you know it more than I do? I've never had it happen to me, but I know it's a concept in psychology.
Yeah, I know a little about it. I know some people that have had it. It's re-stimulating the brain while remembering a traumatic event, and kind of reprogramming your experience with that traumatic event so you can cope with it. It's almost like trying to rewrite your memory, and I don't know how these neurologists and psychologists came up with it, but lights are flashed that stimulate parts of the brain. That's where the E is for eye. I can't remember what all the letters in it stand for. So they're like flashing lights and hypnotizing you, taking you into your subconscious and your memories, and guiding you through traumatic experiences as they happened, to kind of rewrite your experience with them for the better. That's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I've seen videos of people do this online. They'll have like headphones on them, and they'll give them like weird little things that vibrate in their hands. And I guess the theory is like you're supposed to activate the traumatic memory in your brain, but like something about all these inputs and patterns and processing that comes up sort of brings you out of re-experiencing the moment directly, and you're more watching it with a little bit of distance. Because one of the things that happens with a lot of people for PTSD is flashbacks. And before I had PTSD, or before I really knew I had it, I always thought and you didn't know what was happening, and you thought it was Vietnam right now, and there's a helicopter coming. And it's not necessarily like that. It's more like you can't stop thinking about an event even when you don't want to. Like you're just thinking about that memory over and over again, and it doesn't mean you're necessarily confused about, is that happening right now? It just means that it sucks. Like you don't want to pretend you're getting robbed with a gun over and over again 100 times a day. And to give someone an analogy, if you don't have PTSD, what this is like, and people, you'll have to forgive me for bringing this up, but have you ever heard of the game, in quotes? Like, you just lost the game, and everybody listening to this just lost the game.
I know the game starring Michael Douglas. That's about it.
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's not this. Okay, well, you're going to hate me for telling you this, but basically there's a game that everybody in the world is playing, whether or not they realize they're playing the game. It's called The Game, and the rules are, once you think about the fact that you're playing the game, you've lost the game. So the goal is to not think about playing the game as long as possible. And when you lose, you have to announce that you've lost to whoever's around you. Like, oh, I just lost the game. So everybody who's listening right now who knows about the game just lost it. And the goal is to see how long you can go without thinking about it again. And it's kind of impossible because it like works its way through your head, like, kind of like a virus. Like it just kind of dispenses itself. The more you don't want to think about it, the more it'll like fill out all those different like parts in your memory. And I had a friend who was kind of a jerk who like knows I like to play Street Fighter a lot. So he started saying a bunch of Street Fighter noises and saying the game with it, just to like plant it in my brain. He would be like, Sonic Boom, you lost the game. Hadouken, you lost the game. And then now whenever I play Street Fighter 2 or Street Fighter 4, that'll like come up and I'm like, God damn, I just lost the game again. And PTSD is kind of the same way, where like your body and your mind experience something violent, and it thinks, this is really important. I'm going to have to distribute this pattern all over the brain because this is really important to my survival. And this is a little bit of my own pet theory, so this isn't like psychologically proven. But a normal memory might get stored in 1 or 2 places in your brain. I think people with PTSD have a brain that's like, okay, we're in a dangerous life. We better distribute this memory everywhere, so it's constantly accessible. And next time something dangerous happens, this guy's going to know how to act. So I've definitely found the game kind of working its way all through my brain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And violent incidences are pretty similar to that. If you've got PTSD, where they just hide everywhere, and little things can trigger you or remind you of the violent thing, and you can't stop thinking about it. And for me, for instance, this will be controversial all the way through. It's not very PC of me to say, but when I got robbed in a movie theater, it happened to be a black guy who robbed me, just because that was the guy who needed money that particular evening. And someone who's like smart and educated knows you don't. I just gave myself a backwards compliment. I didn't mean to. I'm smart and educated. Hopefully, people are smart and educated. Entire culture or a race on one person's mistake. Like if a white guy punches me on the arm, it doesn't mean I'm gonna go like hate all white people now. A guy who happens to be black robs me, it doesn't mean like, oh, all of a sudden everybody who's black is dangerous or violent. But because of the way PTSD triggers work, the guy who robbed me was like a tough-looking guy. You know, he was a robber, so he's a little bit tough. And he had like, you know, like some like flashy tattoos and just kind of looked like a, you know, like a typical gang member or somebody who's violent. And then I found myself not acting publicly in a bad way, but when I saw anybody who was particularly like tough or wearing signifiers that might happen to be gang-related, I'd get a little panicky. And just because my brain was like, uh-oh, are you going to get robbed again? You better hide out. You better be on guard. People wouldn't know it, but privately in my mind, I would feel that little tinge. And I wouldn't quite call that racism, but that definitely leads to racism in some people where they listen to those signals their brain are giving them and don't have a rational discussion with themselves about what it means and how to act on those. But the funny thing is when the Batman, that's a terrible phrase. The interesting thing that happened is when the Batman thing happened in Colorado, which is, you know, terribly sad. I was a little bit worried about going to movie theaters just because, you know, I'd had gun violence in a movie theater myself. And I think this is when I got in touch with you that night. You'll have to excuse me. It was like 4 in the morning. I've been up all night watching news footage. Just like, Jonathan, you got to have me on to talk about violence in games because they're attacking our games. But anyway, when that happened for a couple of weeks, I was a little scared to, you know, see movies again, just because like it reawakened all these feelings. But the funny thing is, when I was and this is very un-PC of me to say, you'll have to forgive me, but I went to a movie theater and I went to go see Batman, and I was a little on edge. It was like a week later, and I was like, I need to find the toughest person here to protect me in case anything goes wrong. And I was like in the snack counter line waiting to get snacks, and there was some like tough looking kind of like gangster looking black guys. And I don't mean like everybody who's black is a gangster, but these guys particularly dressed like that. And I was like huddling up near them. I was like, they're gonna protect me if a crazy guy comes in shooting up. So I kind of like defeated my PTSD racism, where I was like, okay, now these tough guys can actually stand up for me if somebody attacks the movie theater. Maybe that's just, I don't know. That's a silly anecdote.
No, that's very interesting. It reminds me of how you were attracted to lethal enforcers at an early age. Where like, I'm going to find a way to take the power of the people who terrified me and assimilate with them, so I don't have to be afraid anymore. If you join with the people who are the victimizers, then you don't have to, without, in your case, without becoming a victimizer yourself. I mean, it's a very small thing that you did, but it speaks to that way of coping, which has helped you.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, and here's the biggest story. This is what actually like broke me down and actually gave me full-blown PTSD, where I had to go get diagnosed. And it's a fun story. Like, this is really, really interesting. There's a couple other things in there that I won't get into, like crazy car wrecks and bunch of other like dramatic things, but this is definitely like the top of the list. I've always been interested in religious cults. Part of my one of the writing projects I've been working on for a long time, over the last 8 years in my private time, is working on a book about an old man who joins a religious cult near the end of his life. I've just always found them fascinating. So for the longest time, I've been going to religious cults and undercover as a prospective member and recording the sessions and taking notes, because I really wanted this book I'm working on to be authentic. And I don't do that anymore, because I had an experience that was so crazy at one of these cults that it kind of like ended that whole adventure, because it was just like I got in way over my head. I'd done a couple, and before I did not like to tell people I was doing this, because it kind of blows my cover. I can't go to any more cults if they know like I'm actually like writing about them and not really interested in whatever their crazy ideas are. But I'd been to Scientology, back in the early days. This is before the movie The Master came out, which is really cool. They were very authentic about the Scientology experience. I went to Lyndon LaRouche. Do you know them? They're these crazy political guys. He's got his own little cult and a couple other little smaller ones in LA. But I'd gotten a lead on a good cult, and I'm going to have to be a little vague because these people are sort of friendly, and I don't want people to pinpoint exactly which one this is, but they're a smaller group. They're not really on anybody's radar, but they're up in the mountains somewhere in California. I don't want to specify where, but part of my story that I was researching is I also wanted a young teenage girl to run away from home and join this cult. So a lot of times when I do writing, I do pretty intensive research, right? It's almost like method acting, where I'll just kind of pretend I'm this the character for a little while. So this girl had dyed her hair black to run away from home and took some trains and buses and ends up going to this cult. So that's what I did. I dyed my hair black, and then like I took I know it sounds crazy, but I'm a little crazy. I dyed my hair black, and I took a bus trip and some trains up to a northern part of California because I'd gotten a lead on a good cult who's doing a retreat for this weekend. And a lot of times I've always wanted to do a cult retreat. That's been sort of like my big prize. It's like I can't find a cult that was interesting enough but also not violent to go do research on. Like a lot of times I'll find like, oh, this cult's great, they're really interesting. Oh, and they just got arrested for abusing kids or something terrible. I don't want to get involved in that. So, but this cult seemed perfect. They seemed like really out there with their ideas, but not like violent, like they would hurt anybody. And they told me to like bring all white clothes in my backpack with me, and to tell people that I'm breaking their confidence here, but I'm hoping that I'm being vague enough where none of them will get in trouble. But they told me to wear all white clothes and tell people I was going to see a Brazilian folk music concert. Like that was going to be our cover. And I wasn't supposed to wear white clothes until I got into the building because they didn't want people like, it was this cabin out in the woods. It was like a retreat center, like up in the mountains, like the forest mountains. So they didn't want people, a big line of white people all dressed in white clothes going into this retreat. So we were supposed to like wear normal clothes as a disguise and then put on our cult clothes once we got there. So I went on this like little adventure, and I showed up in a taxi because I'd rode a bunch of trains up and like almost like hitchhiked, like walked a couple miles, and eventually I got tired and needed a taxi the last bit of the way. But when I pulled up to the cult center in the taxi, it was a big bright green taxi. It felt like the beginning of My Cousin Vinny. Do you know My Cousin Vinny when they come into Alabama with Joe Pesci and they're like listening to like this crazy like New York music, and like it's all these like little Alabama yokels who are like, what are these crazy city people doing here? That's what I felt like coming up in my green taxi. Like it was all these like woodsy hippie people who are like looking at me like, what is this guy's deal in his bright green taxi? And I had like a little Galaga or maybe a Space Invaders shirt on, and I just didn't fit in at all. But I ended up going in and like registering for the retreat and changing into my white clothes, and they had a little bit of a meeting. The group was actually from Brazil, and there were about 60 people here who were going to do this like spiritual retreat over the weekend. And I had a little class. Is this boring, or is this okay to get into?
Yeah,
okay.
Get into it.
Okay, so they had this little class for like newcomers. There was like 10 of us who it was like our first time coming, and there was a leader who was a guy from Brazil. He had like a shaved head, and he was really stylish. Like this is the first time I actually saw a cult leader where I understood the charisma. Like this was kind of like a cool guy. His white clothes, he had like it's kind of like a weird like aviator flight jacket that was white, and he had like a really like stylish scarf on, a white scarf, and some cool shoes. And I had just gotten my white clothes from Goodwill. Like I kind of looked a little dumpy. Maybe I've got a picture I can post in the comments sometime of me in my cult outfit. But I was like, this guy's cool. I kind of get it. And he had like a really pretty wife with blonde hair, and they just seemed so like rosy and happy and kind of like spacey and dreamy. And they were like telling us, okay, tonight we're gonna have a very special ceremony, and we're gonna have a bunch of guests with us tonight. We're gonna have Jesus here. We're going to have Buddha here. We're going to have Krishna here. They're all friends with us. We're going to have a lovely time. And we're going to be drinking this tea. And you'll need to drink the tea all through the night. And don't worry, the tea is not poison. You can't die from the tea. if you drink too much of the tea, you'll just throw up. So your body is that Slider, KK Slider wants some of this cult tea. He wants to drink the Kool-Aid. So they're like, it'll make you throw up if you drink too much. So don't worry, it can't poison you, and you can't die from it. And then like for me, I was very naive. I'll go ahead and admit this. I was naive. All I could think is like, this is perfect. Yes, I'm gonna drink some crazy Brazilian tea. This is the full-on cold experience. Everybody's dressed in white. Like I am in my writer's mind. I was like, I hit the jackpot. Like this is what I always dreamed of. Like I did it. Like I'm totally like full-blown in a cult. Like when I went to Scientology, I just gone to like a couple of introductory meetings and a few little sessions, but they eventually want to shake you down for a lot of money. So I wasn't able to get very far. But this one, I was like, dude, I'm right in the middle of this. This is so exciting. Like this is the full-blown cult experience. And then so they were like, and at a certain point in the night, you want to keep drinking this tea. It says, don't drink any more tea. I can't handle any more tea. But drink more. That's the most important time to drink it, because that's when the important work's gonna get done. So I was like, okay, that's a little fishy. And I was getting the impression that this was some kind of like psychedelic or hallucinogenic tea. And it turns out it was ayahuasca. Have you heard of ayahuasca before? Ayahuasca is like a thing that shamans in Brazil and Peru brew up, and like it's pretty much the most potent hallucinogenic drug available in the world. It's got DMT in it, mixed with MAO inhibitor, so it's some like really, really powerful stuff. Yeah, I was not prepared for the experience. They start going around. They have some musicians who are going to play some songs. They have like some Christmas lights. Like it's a pretty nice looking place. Like all these white curtains. And they do this weird ceremony where they like put some incense around you. They make you stand up, and they do like a little namaste. And then you'd go and drink the tea, and they're like playing guitar and like singing some songs. And then maybe this is admitting too much, but this wasn't my first round of experience with a psychedelic. Like in college, I think everybody has that phase where, not everybody, but some people have a phase where they try some things. And this compared to like LSD made LSD seem like having a cup of coffee. Like this stuff was just insanely strong. So what happens is like they're playing all this music, and then the like effects of the tea start to kick in. It tastes really terrible too. It tastes like these nasty like cockroach eggs or something. Like it's really, really terrible. I've never eaten cockroach eggs, but you know, like just imagine like it looks like mud. So I drink this stuff, and we're singing some songs, and it doesn't really do much to me to begin with. And they make us go get another round of tea. So I'm like, yeah, load me up. This is fun. Like I'm having the cold experience. Like I'm singing the songs. I'm taking notes the whole time for my research. And then as soon as I sit down with my second cup of tea, like it just like hits me so hard. Like the thing like washes over me. This is definitely the most full-blown hallucinations I've ever experienced. But a snake came up to me. Like it came up to me in the room and started talking to me. And I know this is, obviously this is the effects of the drugs. I should give you a little bit of background about myself. Like, just as my viewpoint on life. I'm a little bit of a materialist in the scientific sense. I'm not really a religious person. I believed in God when I was a kid, but as an adult, I've kind of decided I'm not really like a believer in God. You might call me an atheist. I'm not like very like dogmatic about it. Like if somebody else believes in God, I think that's great, and maybe he's real, and good. I'm glad they found him. Maybe they got lucky, and I haven't gotten lucky yet. But my current outstate is very like rational and logical. So I'm going into this just to experience like what are these crazy New Age hippies doing. Anyway, the snake comes up to me and starts talking to me in the room, and he's like, I have something very important to show you. If you follow me, I'll show you. And it's going to be very tough for you to look at, but I think you're going to learn something from it. Do you want to follow me? And I'm like, yeah, snake. Because at this point, it seems like a crazy research party. I'm like, I'm loving this cold experience. I'm like, yeah, snake, show me what you got. I'll follow you, and I'll take notes for my book. And so like I follow the snake, and then all of a sudden, everybody in the room starts puking. There's like 60 people here, all dressed in white, and they have like these buckets that are around the room, and everyone starts like sobbing and crying and like throwing up in the bucket. And I guess the theory of their particular religious group is that they're purging their negative emotions out of their life, and then you're throwing up all the poisons that the world has put in you. And I feel like I got to throw up too, but like there's still like a rational part of my brain that I'm like, I'm an adult human being. Like I can't just throw up on the floor in a bucket in front of all these people. Like I gotta go to the bathroom and throw up. I'm not just gonna throw like that. It was embarrassing. I'm a private guy too. So like I got up and the snake was telling me to come this way, and then like I go to the bathroom to throw up, and everybody's like playing music, and they kind of look up like, where's that guy going? He's going off on his own. And the shaman, the Brazilian shaman, follows me to the bathroom, and like I'm about to throw up, and he's like, I can tell you're not feeling so well. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling so great. This thing's gonna make me throw up. And he goes, is it okay if I check you? And I'm like, okay, you can check me. And here's the craziest thing, and I know it'll sound like hippie bullshit to anybody who hasn't experienced it, but it's almost like he gave me a hallucination at this point. Like he grew thousands of arms out of his body, and started fluttering them around me. And obviously this is like effects of a hallucinogenic drug, but it seemed at the time like he knew he was growing these arms as part of like whatever practice he was doing, because he's like a shaman from the jungles of Brazil or something. I'd never experienced something like that. So he was like, I can tell all your pain's like right here. And he pointed to a particular part of my stomach that I'd had surgery in the past year. Just unrelated, like I had some health issues, and I was like, oh, that's crazy that he knows that part of my stomach's hurting. And he's like, it's still, the spirits aren't ready to come out of you yet. He's like, why don't you, the bathroom's dark, why don't you come out of this lonely place, come join the rest of the group, we need your help because we're fighting a spiritual war. And he's like, come back and sit with the rest of the people. So I'm like, okay. And like I'm just kind of like dazed at this point because I've never seen anybody grow thousands of arms. And for people who are familiar with drugs out there, like it's not just like tracers. Like this is like full grown. Like have you ever seen those videos of those Thai Buddhist dancers or something who have like thousands of arms that grow out? Have you seen that before? It's like a row of ladies, kind of like that. So like he pulls me back out to the rest of the group, and I can't make it. Like I just collapse because the effects of this drug are just like hitting me like a wave. And at this point, like everybody's like crying, and people are getting treated. Like there are people waving feathers over me and like spraying perfume on me. And it kind of felt like a World War I hospital or something, where like people were just there for like being treated for their souls or something. Like it was very strange. Like it was like an emergency room or operating room for people with spiritual sickness or something. And I was just like way out of my league. Like I no longer had a grasp on what was going on. So these guys are doing stuff to me. Somebody gives me a foot rub. This shaman, I see him like pulling black spirits out of everybody's backs in the room with his thousands of arms. Later I've read about this, and it's a certain thing called shamanic passing. It's very common for them to grow these extra arms and pull spirits out of people. I don't think I believe in it, but it's interesting that it's a common thing throughout history. I still don't throw up, and like I fall down on the ground, and then this gigantic. I'm gonna speed it up because we're probably getting close to the end of the show, right?
Yeah, we could be. Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna speed it up.
Sure.
Is this all right? Keep going with it.
Yeah. You've got to complete it. You've got to complete the story for me.
So I collapse on the ground, and at this point, like a giant blue bird flows up in the center of the room, and the blue bird tells me that it's God. And I don't believe in God in real life generally, but at this moment when I'm under all these drugs and thousands of arms are happening and it's cold and everybody's puking and crying, like I believe that this bird says it's God. And this bird is really sad, and they start playing these sad songs on the guitar, and the bird says that it's God and that it regrets making the universe. And it's like, I'm really sorry I made the universe. I'm going to try and make the universe disappear right now, but I need your permission to do it. So I'm going to correct the mistake of making the universe as long as you allow me. don't do that, God. And he's like, here, I'll show you what it'll be like. And like the bird, like something snaps and like the world just completely disappears. And the weird thing about this drug is it changes your perception of time pretty drastically. And it felt like the world had disappeared probably for a couple of decades. Like I was in this land of just like crazy blackness and I couldn't see my body. It almost felt like being in a coma, but a coma that lasted for years and years and years and just wouldn't stop. And then when I finally snapped out of it again and came back to real life, the bird was still there. And it was like, now don't you think it was a good idea to erase the universe? That's what it'll be like. I just need your permission to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And the bird's like, okay, here's why I should do it. And the bird flashed to me all the terrible things that had ever happened in my life. Like some stuff I didn't talk about here, some stuff that's a little more serious nature, and just played it on a loop over and over and over and over and over again. And it was definitely like way more intense than I could handle. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. I got to call my wife. She's got to come out to the woods and come and get me and save me from this. Maybe I was dying, that maybe this really was poison, because I was like, I don't know this group. Maybe this is the Kool-Aid moment. And then like I go to finally throw up just because I can't handle it, and then like frogs start jumping out of my mouth. Like frogs start pouring out of my mouth into a bucket. Obviously not real, obviously a hallucination. But at this moment I'm just like, I've lost my mind. Like if I get back from this safely, my mind is not going to be okay. And then here's the thing, people start passing out from drinking too much tea, and the shaman starts going around the room, and he has an iPod and he hooks it up to speakers and he starts playing kids music on repeat, like children's songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Row 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 Your Boat. He plays a Sesame Street song. He plays this one song with kids singing I Am Happy, I Am Good over and over again on repeat for like 20 minutes. Just I am happy, I am good. And I had stopped taking the tea. They told me to go take some more, and I stood in line to take more, and I was just like, I pretended to and went and sat back down because I was like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm way out of my league. So like people start passing out, and I pretend to pass out, but I'm still awake, like with an eye kind of open on the floor, and I see him going around like checking on people and playing all this kids music over and over again on repeat. And I was just like, this is like out of some kind of like Rosemary's Baby, like crazy stuff. Like I don't know what in the world they're doing. But eventually the sun came up and the drugs started to wear off, and everybody was hugging each other and talking about their experience. And they were talking about how they were really happy, and they were really good. And they were like, how are you, Matt? And everybody seemed to know my name. I don't know, maybe I'd said it at some point in the night, but they were like, we really hoped you were getting better. We were cheering for you, Matt. I'm happy, I'm good. And I just kept saying that like they were in a trance. And I was like, oh my God, this is hands down the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And this is the Cliff's Note version. I'm giving you like the really short version because I don't want to take up all afternoon on your show. You're probably wondering how this relates to PTSD and video games. Well, this is kind of the breaking point for me when I got back from this experience to my wife, where I was like, obviously my brain is not normal anymore. Like something about this experience kind of broke me down, and I was like, I don't want to go crazy, so I think I should go see a psychologist maybe and get this stuff fixed. Because what would happen for the longest time is I still thought I was in the cult even when I was back home in Los Angeles. And like I'd wake my wife up in the middle of the night and I'd be like, is this real life or is this still at the cult? Like, tell me something normal. So I feel like, what did you eat tonight? Like, tell me some recipes you cooked. Just say something normal to me so I feel like this is real life. And just because like so many times at that cult meeting I felt I'd come back to real life only to get like dragged back under in this weird world of blackness, and there were so many hallucinations that real life kind of felt like a hallucination. And it was that thing I was talking about earlier where when I was a kid we started to become detached from real life, and I recognized that as like a dangerous state of mind. Now as an adult I'm very peaceful and well adjusted in the sense of my intentions. Like I don't have any desire to hurt anybody now as an adult, but I just like I recognized that weird split from reality, and I was like, I need to go talk to somebody and get this sorted out. Focus. Okay. So anyway, so I went in to see a psychologist and got on medication and learned that, okay, I had PTSD and some of the symptoms I've been having before are all related to this. And the thing that I think that's great about video games that video games could help out with, have you played the game Papo and Yo?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're
Sure,
going to have them on the show next month, I think.
Oh, great. Tell him he's amazing. Well, video games are very particular in the way they activate patterns in your brain. And this one is about a Brazilian kid going to seek out a shaman and like a weird monster eating frogs. And like something about playing that really, really worked well with the troubling patterns in my brain. Like I couldn't get these images out. And playing the video game and having the controller vibrate and having like such a personal story told. Other games have done this for me too, like Asura's Wrath. Have you played Asura's Wrath?
Sure, not for very long though.
There's a part where he grows thousands of arms also, and like you have to like do these quick time battles really quickly to like fight off bad guys, and like they really access all this like hidden imagery in my brain from these traumatic events, and like it's hard to explain to someone who maybe hasn't had this experience, but it feels like it fixes things. There's a game called Skies of Arcadia for GameCube. I played that after I'd come back from this cult, and eventually you fight this blue bird called Blueheim, and it looked exactly like the bird from this like terrible experience I had. And then what happens is it joins up with those patterns in your brain, and almost like replaces the traumatic ones, or like at least sits alongside them. Like instead of having a shaman in my head with thousands of arms, now I have Asura from Asura's Wrath with thousands of arms. Instead of having like an evil bluebird god in my head that's bothering me or giving me nightmares, I also have like this peaceful, cartoony video game. So I know we're running out of time. We've got to wrap it up. But I guess the main point of all this is I think video games really do have a unique power to address these kind of things. And I think they can be used as a tool to help people. And I think it's sort of unfair for the culture to like attack them as the root of the problem, when I know from my personal experience they've helped me a lot. They've helped bring a lot of peace to my mind with these troubling issues that I've got. They've helped me as a kid kind of explore violence in a safe environment and figure out how I felt about it without having to face the real world consequences of doing something regretful. So yeah, I know we zoomed through a lot of stuff there at the end, but I don't want to drag your show on too long. Do you have something you want to say back to it?
I sure do. I've been biting my tongue for a bit. I'm going to give my 20 seconds. If the media thinks that, and if politicians and if scientists and whoever thinks that video games are this powerful that they could drive people to do terrible things, then they could be just as powerful to help people if they were utilized. You've described unique circumstances where they've helped you a lot, and we can imagine that they could help other people if it was organized, but luckily you found them on your own. Why aren't there video games to help people to be less violent, less sexist, less racist, whatever they want to change about themselves? Why couldn't we design games that get into those pockets of the brain like you've described and help rewrite some of that stuff? Why not? Gosh darn it.
I think they're getting there. I think they're getting there. And like the people on your show, all the designers who listen to this, they're like brilliant young kids. Some of them are young, some of them are a little bit older, who are like doing really cool experimental things. And I love it. And I just want to tell them to continue. It's amazing what they're doing, and it's worthwhile. Because I'd like to pretend like I'm tough and, I don't need any help, but video games help me. Like Spelunky helped me, because the crazy amount of like random patterns in that, and how when something goes wrong, you just have to let it go. Like it starts over, and there's nothing you could do to fix that old mistake. You just have to jump back in there and give it another try. Spelunky, like I went nuts on this game. Usually I pick a game when I'm feeling bad with PTSD and like really concentrate pretty hard on it. And some have definitely helped me out. So I want to thank the designers on the game on your show, because like I play all their games that you recommend, and just tell them great job and continue doing it. What they're doing is important, not just in a sense of fun, but like important like as a human. They've definitely helped me, and I appreciate that. So they're on the right track. Keep it up, guys.
Yeah, I agree. I want someone to take Spelunky and do some scientific trials with it, like they've done with Tetris. Is the only one I know of.
Yep,
that's helped people with PTSD. My guess is because the human experience is about integrating new information with your old information, and that's all Tetris is integrating a new piece with your old pieces that you already had, and being able to make order of that would help someone with their mental processes if they've got new information they can't deal with. Oh, Sinistar is writing me a text message saying I gotta shut up.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate
Gosh,
you
darn
letting
it.
me on and going for so long. I know like there's so much here.
It was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show. People should follow you on Twitter if they want to.
Oh
think
yeah,
that they do.
I'm at
How do they do that?
silent_Tristero. Silent Tristero. Follow me if you want to. And I have a website where I write free stories. I wrote a free story for you. Can I plug that really quick? Wireisalive.com. Wire is alive. WIREISALIVE.com. Basically, I write a free fiction story for everybody every week. I wrote one for you about zombies. I wrote one for Chad about dolphins. You just come by the site, send in the subject matter, and I'll write you a free story. Like, it's something I do for fun. So yeah, I encourage people to get involved in that.
Was that the story about someone who thinks they're a zombie?
The one, yeah, about the baptizing zombies. Yeah,
it was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. I guess for me, you can follow me, Tronauts, on Twitter. And the show, this is the first time you're seeing it. If you're not familiar with it, you can listen to it on iTunes. I think you can listen to it on Libsyn still, and you can watch it on Dtoid TV. You can watch the reruns on YouTube on the Dtoid TV channel there. And we're on Twitch TV. We stream live every Sunday. I have to check the schedule who's on next week, but every Sunday we've got somebody. And the next Sunday will be no exception. It's going to be a great guest. I just don't know who it is. Gosh.
All right. Thanks again for having me on. I definitely appreciate it. Very sweet of you.
Yeah. I wish we could, if opportunity arises, love to have you on again. So.
Oh, great. Yeah, there's tons to talk about. All right.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.